webinar this morning, as you can see, hopefully everybody can see my screen, is the introduction to the Evolution pump that was recently released. For this presentation, I have Keith Harry Harrison to do the presentation, and I'll let him get started. I should take close to maybe a little less than 30 minutes. After that, we'll open the presentation up to some questions.
Thank you, Doug, and good morning to everybody. Again, my name is Keith Harrison, commonly known as Harry. I am the business development director for ProMinent, and one of my primary focuses is developing and working with getting our process pumps and our process equipment out into the field. Some of you may know me from some of those products that we've been dealing with. What we want to go through today is the Evolution Series pump, basically an introduction to this pump. Many of you may have actually seen some of this information. It may be a little bit of a refresher for you. But we want to make sure that everybody's aware of what this product is, what it can do, and where the fits are. And on top of all of that, who the contacts might be, who you want to get a hold of if you've got any questions on this equipment. So, initially, ProMinent was looking at the development of this product for a couple main reasons. Some of you may be familiar with the Orlita series product. It was an older series, but very capable series of chemical metering pumps, designed roughly in the 1970s. We needed a piece of equipment that was a little bit more modern, took advantage of some of the newer technologies that were out there for chemical metering pumps. Additionally, we needed a product that was a little bit more competitive. Price competitiveness with the older Orlita product was a little bit hard to do. It was a very custom engineered product, or still is. We still offer that product. It still fits in certain applications very well, but being a very custom engineered product, it added a little bit of additional expense to the piece of equipment. And then most importantly for us, especially in the U.S. markets, was better delivery. We wanted a product that we could actually ship in a quicker time frame to match some of the competition that we run into here in the United States. So what is the Evolution Series pump? The Evolution Series pump is designed around the API 675 specification. API 675 is specific to chemical metering pumps, or positive displacement chemical dosing pumps. It is the American Petroleum Institute standard that everybody tends to build their pumps to. So it meets a high level of industrial standard. It is one of those specifications that a lot of manufacturers will take some general basic exceptions to, but for the most part, you've got a general guideline as to how you need to design that pump. We are compliant with the Evolution pump to the third edition, the most recent edition of API 675. It is a hydraulically actuated diaphragm pump, meaning that it has hydraulics driving the diaphragm, and consequently that pump can do extremely high pressures. It's capable of up to 5,800 psi, as you can see below. So it's capable of very high-end process type projects and applications. It is a non-loss motion drive, which means it is a design that meets certain applications and certain standard specs for various clients, lends itself to the higher flow applications, becomes a very robust drive. These drives are not always the least expensive in the world. You won't find it in the very small pumps usually, but you'll see it in the higher end pumps where you need a much higher flow, much higher pressure applications. The Evolution was designed to run in flow ranges starting at about 1 gallon an hour and up to 1,800 gallons an hour. It's able to do that through 4 frame sizes. Depending on the application, we can tailor in an application of a single pump selection if we need to. Again, those pressures on those applications will go up to 5,800 psi in some of the lower flow applications for some of these services. With the 4 frame sizes, each one of those frames will have 5 gear ratios, and each one of those frame sizes has a multitude of plunger diameters. What that means for you guys is you can tailor a pump very tightly into an application. If a client has a very specific application that they want to get a very tight application flow rate, we can do that. The disadvantage in doing that is you have a lot of different possibilities for stock. So we actually have a program built into this pump that is what we'll call preferred plungers. And preferred plungers are the ones that are always going to be on the shelf. So if a customer has a quick delivery requirement, preferred plunger tends to lean itself to that. If they have a very tight application, we can go in and look at one that may not be sitting on the shelf, but we can build it in with a span of 4 to 6 weeks maybe. So we've got a lot of flexibility in the way we can apply that pump. The Evolution pump was designed to go after a broad spectrum of markets. Normally when we talk about API 675 pumps, American Petroleum Institute, we're thinking about chemical and petrochemical, hydrocarbon processing, the higher end process applications, which is exactly what this pump is designed for. What a lot of folks don't think about right off the top is other services where this pump's going to fit into. The power industry, for example. The United States is currently on a process of replacing a lot of old coal-fired power plants, so there's a lot of new gas-fired plants being installed in the U.S. Because of that, there's a lot of new applications, and those chemical feed applications can be relatively high pressure. So the Evolution does fit into a lot of those services very well. The oil and gas industry, even though it is not exactly doing the best right now because of low oil prices, the business is still there. We know from past experience that the oil industry always has a cyclic effect. It will come back up at some point in time, and with this product, you'll actually have a piece of equipment that will fit it very well, including offshore applications for those customers that are in the Gulf Coast, or anybody dealing with an engineering firm that might be doing a project overseas for an offshore application. The ones that don't always come to mind are the water and wastewater treatment applications. Even municipal type plants periodically will specify a hydraulically actuated diaphragm pump. They don't need it for the pressure, usually. Most of those plants are 150 pounds discharge pressure at the most. But they have an engineer that has specified a product that says it needs to be a hydraulically actuated diaphragm pump. The Evolution fits those services very well. It's designed as a very robust pump. It will be a very low maintenance product for them. Because it's designed for those very high pressure applications, it's basically putting a very, very heavy duty pump into a very light duty service. You'll get a very long life operation out of that pump. Also, you'll see pulp and paper industry, plastics, rubbers, resins. Basically, any industrial application that uses chemical feed and you need a relatively high pressure, relatively high flow rate, or a combination of those, you'll see it into those services. Reviewing some of those design advantages that the Evolution has, the high pressure is one of those things that comes to mind immediately. One of our bigger competitors that has probably the largest population of chemical feed pumps in this range out in the world tops out at about 3,500 pounds. So you've got immediately a product that actually can do higher pressure applications where they would have to step up into a much more expensive, much more complex drive mechanism to hit those high pressures. You're in a standard product, so you've got an ability to fit into those services much easier. It uses the variable eccentric drive, a non-loss motion drive. It's a little bit more complex in the way it operates, but the net result is you get a very robust drive. These drives tend to run 15, 20 years without any maintenance other than changing oil. So they're very long life, they're very robust designs. They will give a very reliable product to most customers. One of the features the Evolution has is it is always a double diaphragm with leak detection. That advantage sets you apart from some of the competition where they throw that in as an adder. That may be anywhere from $1,800 to $2,400 depending on the competition. To put that into their pumps where we have it as a standard option. The leak detection option in the Evolution pump is done either via gauge, which is our standard offering, or you can add a pressure switch, either rated for regular environment or explosion-proof environment. So you've got a few options in there, and we can even upgrade that if a client has a very particular requirement for leak detection, if they want a special transmitter or something like that. The Evolution brings to us one other thing, which is some newer technology. We introduced what's called the diaphragm positioning system, which I'll show you a little bit of here shortly. And the diaphragm positioning system basically ensures that the Evolution will not damage diaphragms in either a starved suction or a blocked-in discharge condition. Those two conditions, the starved suction and blocked discharge, are the two operating conditions that are most likely to damage diaphragms in a hydraulic metering pump. Easily 90 to 95% of the installations that blow diaphragms, that's what it's caused from. So by eliminating that issue, by introducing this diaphragm positioning system, which actually takes the diaphragm and puts it in a neutral position, it gets us out of some of those hazardous issues and damaging issues that customers are going to run into. You know, that diaphragm positioning system is part of that 21st century design. Most of the competition out there has got pumps that were designed in the 1960s and 1970s. There's not a lot of new technology. There's a few things that came out in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, but there's not a whole lot of new technology that's coming out. They're relying on old things that are still running. Again, we have a broad range of plunger sizes. We also have a commonality of frame design. You'll see in a couple short videos I have here that the pump in the 4 frames is basically the same design, but scaled up. So if an operator has an Evolution 1 and an Evolution 4, the basic work that they may have to do on it, operations and maintenance, is exactly the same. It's just a different scale. We have an internal cooling relief. This is not necessarily something required in the U.S., but the ATEX requirement in Europe has asked for it. But one of the advantages for a lot of customers is they know that if this pump goes on an extended internal relief, they're not going to build heat. They're not going to have any additional issues with damaging oil. Once the pump goes into a normal condition, it actually comes back up to operating conditions with no problem. Again, it's an API 675 compliant pump. It's a very modular design. You can multiplex this pump, and you can multiplex different frame sizes. We're actually working on one right now that is an Evolution with 5 different frame sizes, or 5 different pumps on it, multiple different frame sizes. And then on top of that, you can also do automatic stroke and speed control to give you a lot more flexibility on the controls for the pumps as well. I'm going to show you a couple quick videos. These will hopefully come through fairly clearly on the webinar. If they do not, these videos are actually available through the ProMinent website, or you can contact me and I can get you copies of these as well. They are currently shown using metric units in some cases. However, we are working on an update that will actually show everything in US units. I'll do a little on-the-fly conversion for you guys so you can see where we're at and how these pumps kind of fit into some of the things you're looking at. So, first off, we'll start with the Evolution pump family. If it will open. So you see there's 4 frame sizes that we're looking at. Obviously, they all look very similar in the way that they're configured. So the Evolution 1 starts out, again, 400 bar or 5,800 PSI, and good up to about 40 gallons an hour. 160 liters per hour is about 40 gallons an hour. Evolution 2 up to 380 liters an hour, which is equivalent to about 100 gallons an hour. The Evolution 3, again at 5,800 PSI, and flows out to 970, which is about 250 gallons an hour. And the Evolution 4, which is published here with a high flow rate of about 3,000 liters per hour. Just so you understand as well, I told earlier in the presentation there's about an 1,800 gallon an hour max. This pump can actually hit that flow. It's a little bit lower in pressure. But 3,000 liters an hour is 790 gallons an hour, but it will go up to about 1,800 on a couple other models. But you'll see just in those 4 frames, you cover a broad spectrum in just basically the same design. Some of the design features. So the first off is the variable eccentric. This allows the pump to adjust its stroke length without any major pulsation spikes. It's a very heavy-duty design. Relatively simple to work with, but double diaphragm pump, automatic in every one of our models. It's not set as an option, it's actually a standard. The diaphragm position control, which helps make sure the diaphragm stays in a safe condition. Overpressure protection. And then leakage compensation for any hydraulic oil lost past the plunger or through the air bleed valve. Of course, air bleed for the hydraulics. When you deal with a hydraulic system, you have to be able to bleed air off of that system. All of these are integrated into the pump. And then the flexibility. The advantage of the way the Evolution was designed is you've got a lot of flexibility for being able to do different things with this pump. So if you want to multiplex it, you move the motor to the side, and then you can add additional drive cases. And these can be different size drive cases as well. You can put a 4 with a 2 or 4 with a 1. So you've got a lot of flexibility on those. But it's basically been tailored to the different markets that you're going to run into. Of course, the oil industry, gas operations, gas industries, chemical industry, and those other markets that we spoke about earlier. So again, we're talking about a standardized product as opposed to the current or Lita product line, which is a much more engineered product for individual applications. This is a much more standard modular design. This will be manufactured in the USA. That's actually one of the biggest advantages that we're bringing to the table. We're working on the plans for that now. The idea is we want to have that better delivery. We have to build that in the United States, and that's what we're working on now. It's one of the projects that I'm in the middle of right now. It is a technically superior pump. It is much more modern technology. It's adding a lot more features to it without a lot more complexity to the pump. It gives you a lot more advantages. And ultimately, market competitive. It's going to be price competitive against all of those known players in the market today. Now we'll open everything up to questions. I'll let Doug open up the...
So if you have any questions, there is a chat bar on your webinar interface. So feel free to put any questions you have in there for Harry. While we're waiting for those, the next webinar is June 10th. It will be on presenting the DACA, our analyzer, is now available with Ethernet capabilities. That is released. It's available in eQuote, so you can start quoting that. And I will show you that interface on June 10th, along with the addition of Modbus. So the question is, what materials are available for the liquid end?
The standard liquid end options are available right now in metallics. Of course, the 316 stainless steel is our standard. We can also offer it in alloy 20, or what is effectively the German equivalent of alloy 20. And we can also offer it in a Hastelloy. If a customer has a special application, that's also fairly easy. It's just a matter of changing materials and machining in the same way. So that's not a difficult thing to do. Currently in development is a non-metallic liquid end. We're testing both PVC and Kynar. Those are in pressure and reliability testing right now, and those will be available. My expectation is in the next 8 to 10 months. I've seen them in testing now, and everything seems to be working pretty well. So, can we discuss any specific applications or processes in the chemical industry? In the chemical industry, a lot of this is going to be related to chemical feeds, a general process. maybe something as simple as a catalyst injection. You may have just additives and feeds. In the oil and gas industry, you may have detergents and other things going to a gas stream or gasoline stream. So it's going to be related to those chem feed process oriented applications in the oil and gas industry. Chemical industry, the strange thing there is every plant's a little different. It depends on what their little magic mix is of what they're making. But as long as a customer is feeding something and they need it at an accurate rate and relatively high pressures or relatively high flows or a combination thereof, you'll have a chemical metering pump in those applications. Let's see, Stephen at Saladin, let's see, do you have a unit to compete with the Orlita MFS 600 373737? The current Evolution series pumps, now what Stephen's referring to there is one of the older Orlita lines. The current Evolution pumps cover the old Orlita products, if you guys are familiar with those, from the S18 drive up through the S180 drive. The S600 drive and the S1400 drive, they're much higher flows. We do not have Evolutions to cover those ranges yet. Those are actually in development. We're actually working on one that's actually a little bit lower flow as well. So what we found is the bigger flows, the big S100, S600, and S1400s, we can be market competitive with those. In fact, Stephen's proven that by selling a few down in his territory. But as of yet, we don't have an Evolution to compete with those products.
And then, from my understanding, the old Orlita line is not going anywhere.
Yes, the old Orlita line is still there. There's still places where it fits. Whether we need a higher pressure than 5,800 psi, the old Orlita can do that. The current Evolution is not designed for extreme high temperatures, so we have some high temperature capabilities in the old Orlita line. Those tend to be those specialty applications, which the old Orlita line was actually very good with because it was designed to be a custom engineered product. The new Evolution is more along the lines of the straightforward chemical feed pump, chemical metering pump applications as opposed to the more custom specialty applications. Any additional questions? Feel free to put those in. All right, let's see what we have. Trinova. Is the pricing always going to be consult factory? For the time being, it is, but the end result will be no. My ultimate goal is to have this in something as simple as eQuote. To be able to quote these, you do need to have a little bit more training because when you get into the higher pressures and the more process-oriented applications, the selections are a little bit more touchy, so you need to get some additional training, but ultimately we want to be able to have some selections where you guys can make those picks on your own, give you a little bit more autonomy to, at the very least, get your customers a budget number and something to start with. Keep in mind, a lot of these projects tend to be project-oriented work, so they do have a little bit longer leads, so sometimes the consult factory is not a major issue. We are putting a team together here that supports primarily our process-oriented business. So we should hopefully be able to respond to those kind of requests fairly quickly if we need to. All right. If you guys have any additional questions or any other concerns, well, we got one more. What's the minimum NPSHR? Minimum NPSHR, minimum net positive suction head required. Typical for this pump is going to be a 3 to 4 PSI-A net positive suction head. One of the advantages of the diaphragm positioning system gives you a very good suction lift capability. The NPSHR is, however, very dependent on a couple of the conditions around the pump, including stroking speed and product that we're pumping. So what we do is we actually have a selection program that helps us pick the pumps to make sure that we're getting a good selection. And it takes into consideration all the design conditions in the pump and the chemical that we're pumping. So a little bit of the NPSH required is dependent on the product we're pumping, and we can accommodate that. A lot of the published values are based solely on water, but the reality is this pump will pump almost everything but water. Because if you're just pumping water, you don't necessarily need a chemical meter pump. So, all right. If you have any other additional questions, you can always reach out to me. Give me a call here in the office, and or send me an email. Email is keithh@prominent.us, and I'd be certainly glad to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thanks a lot, Eric. That concludes this webinar. I appreciate everybody showing up, and I hope to see you again next month on June 10th.